In this video, we're going to take a look at how to program Hangman, but doing it dynamically through code. We have 26 buttons we're going to need. Each button is going to represent one letter of the English alphabet. Now, we are not going to drag and drop 26 buttons. What we are going to do is write code to generate those 26 buttons and also tie all 26 buttons to the same click event. We don't want to have to rewrite the same code 26 times. When we click on any of those buttons, we're going to run code that will deal with checking to see if the letter they click on is in the word that was selected. We're also going to generate only the amount of labels that we need. If we have a 6-letter word, then we will generate 6 labels and only 6 labels. If we generate a 3-letter word, we will generate only 3 labels. We're not going to have 10 labels with only 3 being seen and 7 being invisible or not visible to the user. We're only generating the amount of labels that are needed. So let's go ahead and let's get started. We're going to start with our form. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to change our form name. So I'm looking for it here. I think I passed it. Yep, right here. So this is going to be form, and I called mine game. We also want to change this text property. We don't want it to say form 1. What we want it to say is Hangman because, well, that's what the user is going to see. And we don't want them to see form 1. We want them to see what they're doing. So Hangman, there we go. Now the next thing we're going to do is I've already programmed this just like anybody who makes a video. They're not doing it on the fly. Most of the time, they are looking at their notes because I want the buttons to appear centered on my form. I already have that math and those numbers figured out. So I'm going to use those numbers that I have that will allow me to put my buttons centered and appear like they do on a keyboard. The next thing we're going to need is we're going to need a picture box. So this is the only thing that we're not going to program. Now we could, but we do not need to. So I'm going to put this picture box kind of close to the center. I'm going to front load or preload an image into it. And to do that, we need to import the pictures into our program. Remember to load your images into your projects. You're going to click on project, scroll all the way down. You're looking for the name of your project and then the properties. You're going to click on that resources tab over here on the left hand side. This will be on strings by default. You're going to click this down arrow, change it to images, add resource, add existing file. Now I have 8 status pictures. I simply called them H1, H2, and so on, H for Hangman, and then the number to represent the status in sequential order. That's a lot easier than trying to name it, H head and body, H4 instead of head, body, right arm, left arm, whatever it may be. It's a lot easier just to keep them in sequential order. The user's not going to see that, but we do want to show them the game has started. So let's change the properties of this picture box. Let's go ahead and change that name. Now I called mine pick status. You can call yours whatever you want, but you want to get in the habit of naming your objects that you're going to use. The next thing I want to change is size mode to stretch image. So one double click or clicking this down arrow, you'll be able to select it. The last thing I want to do is go ahead and give it an image that it can start with, which is going to be H1 to show them the game has started. So as soon as they start the game, the label and the buttons will appear because we're going to do that through code and they will see this picture box. So let's go ahead and get started. Now for our game, there are going to be some variables that we need. Now remember, you want to put that keyword private in front of these. You do not have to. It is not required. It will do it by default, but you want to get in the habit of doing that. The first thing we're going to need is correct. I need to keep track of how many letters have they gotten correct in the word. Once the value of correct matches the amount of letters in the word, we know the game is over because the user has guessed all the letters. And I also need to keep track of how many letters they have gotten wrong. There are 7 tries they're going to have in Hangman, so I'm going to keep track of that. That way I know when the game is over, because if they don't guess the word in the certain amount of tries, which in this case is going to be 7, we need to end the game. We also need a string to hold the randomly selected word. We need to be able to access that from anywhere. The last thing we need is a list of labels, and we're going to call that letters. And what this will do is allow us, when we generate that list of labels, allow us to access whichever one we need to directly. And we can't do that without a list of labels. With that being said, we are ready to move on. Oh, let's do one more thing. On my game, I want to change the back color. To do that, on my form, I do this dot back color equals, and then I do color, and that will allow me to access all the list of colors. Now, I chose black. You do not have to do that. You can do that if you want to. You can do black or change it to any color. With that, we're ready to move on to the pick a word method. All right, and to create that method, we want to make sure we're inside of our public partial class, but outside the other methods. We're going to make it public void. It does not return anything, and we're simply going to call it pick word because that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to create an array of strings, and we're going to call this words. Now, for this first part, all we're going to do is put in 5 or 6 words. So we'll do computer. Now I'm going to make them all lowercase, and then I'm going to convert them to all uppercase because it will just look better, and I'll show you how to do that. And we're going to use a special uppercase method, and we'll talk about what the difference is between them. So we're going to do, so we got computer, coding, C#, Hangman, and we'll do duck. So that's good. Put a semicolon. Now, when we want to add words later on, we can definitely do that. Now, C# is wanting us to do something with a enhanced for loop, but that's not what we're here to do. We're going to create a random variable called R&D num, and that's going to be a new random. And what we're going to do is we're going to use that to get a random number, and that number is going to represent the index. So our index is going to be equal to R&D num dot next, and then what we want to do is pick between index 0 and words dot length. Now you may be saying, well, why don't we just go ahead and do the length of it, which is I think there's 5 words. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Why don't we just do between 0 and 5? Because using this code will allow you to add as many words as you want, and it will always randomly select a word. Now, once we get the index, we're going to assign our global variable word. What's going to be that? Well, that's going to be words and then whatever index was selected. Now, the next thing we need to do is all the buttons are going to be uppercase. We want them, so we want when they click on an uppercase letter, which is any letter, because they're all going to be uppercase, we want it to match. So all the words need to be in uppercase. Well, here I did it in all lowercase. Well, if I make a mistake, and if I have to make all these uppercase, and I make a mistake somewhere, it's going to be very hard to go through an entire list of words looking for that. So I'm just going to simply write a line of code to do that. Now, we're going to do word equals word dot. Now, there is 2 upper and there's 2 upper invariant. This is the difference between them. If you are inside the United States, you can use 2 upper. You can also use 2 upper invariant, but it's not going to matter. If you're outside the United States and you're using this code to create your own program, you want to use 2 upper invariant. That is so no matter what culture we are in, we're going to get the same results. So that is the difference between 2 upper and 2 upper invariant. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to do message box.show, and what we're going to do is we're going to say the word is, and then we're simply going to display the word. That way, when we are testing our program, we're not actually trying to figure out what it is. We already know what it is. We can test to make sure we lose. We can also test to make sure we win without having to really try to guess the word. The next thing we need to do, now that we've picked the word, we need to create the keyboard. Now this is going to be another method that doesn't return anything. So again, public void, and we're going to call it create keyboard. All this code, this is going to be where the bulk of our code for the Hangman program is. This is what's going to create the buttons all the way. Now, you can use a nested for loop to handle this. What I wanted to do was I wanted to get row 1, row 2, and row 3 independent of one another. And when I say row 1, I'm talking about row 1 of a standard QWERTY keyboard. I wanted to have each row independent because I wanted it to look just like it does on an actual keyboard. I wanted those keys staggered on the next row. I want it to look nice, so I separated each row because it's just easier to do that math that way. So I'm going to create an array of characters, and I'm going to go ahead and pre-populate all of these. So I'm going to do Q, W, and we want to use single quotes. I'm going to do E, then the next letter all the way down, T, not tab, alignment. There we go. Then we need to do Y, then U, then I. And you want to use those quotes. So you have that. Turning your caps lock key on will make this go a little bit faster. And then P. There we go. And we're going to put our semicolon at the end here. We're going to do the same thing for row 2 and row 3. Now once we've created that array of characters, the next thing I need to do is create some variables. These are the variable values that you're going to want to manipulate to get the keys where you want them to go. I've already worked on these. They already work perfectly. So I'm going to do int left pause for left position. I'm going to set that equal to 50. I also need the top position. Where is it going? How far from the top is it going to be? Well, that's going to be 250. I also need to set my button width. Now, I want mine to be 40. I feel like that's a good size. Just like the width, I also need to know the button height. That is going to be 40. And then what I need is a spacing variable that will space out how far I need to put apart each button. I don't want all the buttons touching one another. That's going to look bad. I want just a little bit of space, just like there is on the keyboard. Now, anytime you're doing computer science, math is involved. Math and computer science to go hand in hand. You can't do computer science without coding. Can't do coding without some math. Now, these math formulas I've already worked out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do total width row 1 because row 1, I want to be able to space them out. I also want to be able to figure out how far the width needs to be. And I need to know how far the width needs to be so I can center them on my form. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to set that equal to row1.length, which is the amount of keys. So if I change this from a QWERTY keyboard to a Dvorak keyboard, for instance, I can go ahead and change the keys without having to change this numerical value down here. So I'm going to do one row.length. I'm going to multiply that by, and I'm going to calculate the button width plus the spacing. And then what I'm going to do is minus that extra spacing that we're going to have at the end. So I'm going to take my button width and the spacing because that is how much space is between each button because I need the width and the spacing. I'm going to multiply that by however many characters are inside my row, and then I'm going to get rid of that extra spacing on the end because that's not going to be needed. I'm going to need to do this a total of 3 times. I'm going to do row2.length, and all I'm going to do is multiply that by the exact same thing, the button width. I'm going to add that spacing because I want to do it multiple times, and then I want to get rid of that extra spacing on the end. So then I'm going to do total width row 3, and I'm going to do the same thing here. Row3.length. Multiply that by, I need to know the width of the button with the spacing so they're not all touching one another. I want to do that multiple times, and I want to subtract that extra spacing that we're going to have on the end. Now, and the reason I have done this is so I know how wide each row is going to be, and I want to know how wide it is so I can center it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another one called center left row 1 because I want to center it. And I want to center it on the left side. And I want to make sure I spell that correctly because when I go to use this later, I need to be able to use it. So what we're going to do is we're going to do this dot client size dot width So that's the width of our form. Then what we're going to do is we're going to subtract that by total width row 1, and then we are going to divide by 2. So C# knows what we're trying to do, that we're trying to center it. And then I'm going to do the same thing for center left row 2. Now for center left row 2, it's going to be, I want to center it, but we'll adjust it later on when we go to do it all. So it's going to be this dot client size dot width minus total width row 2, and then we're going to divide by 2. So we're going to do that there, and then we're going to do the same thing for row 3. So center left row 3. Now, do you have to do this to get your Hangman program to work? No, you don't. You don't have to do this at all. It is nice to do, though, so it looks professional. And we're going to divide by 2, just like that. The next thing we can do is we can create a count controlled loop, which is a for loop that will actually instantiate and create every single button that we will need, while also adding it to the form. We're going to have 3 of those. We're going to have one for row 1, a second one for row 2, and a third one for row 3. We could do it all in one single count controlled loop, but with the spacing and where we want to put them, it's a little easier if we handle it independently. Now this is where when we create this for loop, you're going to see why we use all of these. The left position, actually the left position, we can get rid of this because we're centering everything, so we can get rid of that. We do need the top position though. We do need the button width, the button height. When I create this in my for loop, rather than just putting values, I can put the variables, and I can adjust these values if they're not showing up the way that I want them to. So let's go ahead and create a for loop for this first one. So I'm going to do int I equals 0 as long as I is less than, or while it's less than the row dot length, this for loop's going to run. And of course we need to increment I so it runs multiple times. So the first thing we need to do is we need to create a button. I'm going to call mine BTN. I don't have to give each of these a different name. They're all going to be the same name, and that is fine because I'm creating a brand new button each time. Each of these buttons are going to be tied to the same event. So the first thing I want to do is I want to do btn.backcolor, and what I want to make that is I want to make that black. I want to make that black. You can make it any color you want. The next thing I want to do is I want to change that for color, and I'm going to have that equal to color, and I chose green. So you can choose whatever colors you want. I suggest you choose colors that complement one another. Now for the text, this is extremely important because we want it to say the letter. So I want to do row 1, and I want to do I. Now when you do I here, so you do row 1.I, you'll see it's an error, and that's because it cannot go from character to string. You have to use the toString method. Once you do that, it'll take the character inside that index of row 1, and it will change it to a string and put it in double quotes so it can fulfill that text property. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do the width, and that is simply bWidth. And now I don't have to change it multiple times because I got to do this 3 times. I got to do this 3 times. Because if I do each row independently, it gives me a little bit more flexibility on what I can do. All right, now the left property, this is where we start to center it all on the math formulas that we did. So we're going to do btn.left, and what we're going to do is we're going to do center left row 1. We're going to add the width of the button plus the spacing, and then what we're going to do here is we're going to multiply it by I, and that's because I want it to be at a different spot each time that button is created. For the top position, I'm simply going to do the top position variable that I created, and then I need to tie it to the click event, and that click event I'm going to call letter button click. That's what I'm going to call mine. Now, you're going to have an error there. That is fine. That's because we have not created the method yet. We'll be doing that next. Now, once you create the button, you have to add it to the form. So you use this dot controls dot add, and what are we adding? We're adding the button we just created, which is called btn. Let's fast forward where all 3 for loops are done for all the rows. So we have the for loop we wrote together for row 1. So we have row 1 dot length. The text is row 1 I dot to string, and we have center left row 1. Our code is identical for row 2, except for we change it to center left row 2 I, and then row 2 dot length. For row 3, we do the exact same thing. Center left row 3. We have row 3 I dot to string and row 3 dot length. The next thing we need to do, I guess now that we've created the buttons, is we need to go ahead and we need to create the labels in that method, which means we'll need to get the word and start counting those letters as well. So we'll write the label, generating the label method first, then we'll go back and start calling these methods so our program can start coming together. All right, let's go ahead and move on to creating those labels. So public void, and a good name for this is create labels, because that is what we are doing. No parameters there. Now we're going to need top position. We're not going to need left, because we're going to need to center these as well. We don't want it to be the same top position as the buttons, because we don't want them to lay directly on the buttons. We want them to be just a little bit above the buttons, but we do want the text to match. So we're going to make the width of it 40. We're going to make the height also 40. So they're roughly about the same size, or they are the same size of the buttons, and spacing 5 works well. Now for int num letters, that is going to be the word that was randomly selected, and we're simply going to get the length of that word, because if the length of the word is 5, I know I need to create 5 letters, and I'm going to use that inside my for loop, or as part of the condition of my for loop. Now I need to get the total width again. I want to get the total width so I can center it. So I need to know how many letters there are. I'm going to multiply that by the width, and I'm going to add that to my spacing, because there's not going to be anything put on there. And then I'm simply going to subtract that spacing at the end. So then I need center left. And when I center it to the left, I'm going to do this dot client size, just like I did earlier. I'm getting the width of my form. I'm subtracting that by the total width. Then I'm going to divide by 2. And I'm going to get rid of that spacing. Now, if yours is not, let's see here. Oh, let me put a space there. If you do not like where your labels are showing up, this is as close as I could get it with, this is as close as I could get them to be centered. If you would like to adjust this, you can. I have 5 here. That's the same as my spacing. So I can use that. So you may want to adjust them if you don't like where they are ending up. Now that I have that, I can actually create that for loop. So I'm going to do for int I equals 0. I want I to go as long as I is less than num letters, and then we're going to increment I. Now, if you are familiar with for loops, you can definitely use that autofill. If you're not, I would strongly recommend that you type it out. So we're going to do label LBL equals a new label. We're simply going to do that, and then we got to give it a text. What is the text going to be? Well, that's going to be a placeholder, which is simply an underscore. We need to make sure we have that underscore. Make sure we have that semicolon. We're going to give it the for color. Now, what I want to do is I want to give it a slightly different color. So I chose lime green instead of green, just to give it something a little different. And you want to put that semicolon again. All right, the next thing we need is we need the width. Well, that's going to be L width, which is my label width. Then I also need the height, and that's going to be the L height variable that I created. Then we're going to need its left position. Now, for its left position, that is why we did all that math earlier. So we're going to do center left plus, and what we're going to do is we're going to do L width plus the spacing, and we're going to do the same thing we did on the last one, times I. I guess we don't need that double set of parentheses here. Get rid of that. All right, so what that's going to do is help center it on the left. Now, I need the top. How far is it from the top? And that's the top position. I want to use that. Now, the top position I have inside this method is isolated from the top position we have in the other method. They are not related. They just have the same name, but they are not related at all. Then I want to text align. I want to center the text inside this label. So I simply do content alignment dot, and I'm going to do middle, and I'm going to do center, not middle left. And that's so when we populate the label from an underscore to the letter, it's in the center and it'll look nice and clean. The last thing I need to do, or there's two things left I need to do. I need to add this label to my form. Then what I need to do is add it to the list so I can access it later on. I'm not going to be able to access these like I do the button. So I'm going to do this dot controls dot add. What am I adding? That label we just created. I'm adding that to the form. And then my letters list that I created at the beginning, I'm going to add something to my list. What am I adding? The label we just created so we can access it later on. The next thing we need to do is create that click event so we can actually run our code and see what it looks like so far. Now, when we create this click event, the general rule is when you're creating events, you want to make them private, not public. So we're going to do private void because it doesn't return anything. We called ours letter button click. Now, when you are creating your event, you do want two parameters. It is going to be object sender event arguments E, and we're going to talk about what that does. So let's write a little bit of code first. So we need to create a button called clicked button because we need to get what button they clicked. But before we do that, we need to make that actually we need to do sender as button. Almost writing the wrong code there. We're not creating a button, we're getting the button that they clicked. So right here when it says sender as button, that is the object. Sender is of the object data type, and we're saying, okay, that object is going to be the button that they clicked on because we called ours clicked button. This event argument allows us to handle the button that is being clicked based on the sender, which is an object, and we just made that sender variable that is of the object data type a button. Now C# is trying to write some code for us. We're going to do a success variable that's Boolean. We're going to set that equal to false because we need to know when they guess a letter, were they successful or not. The next thing we need to do is store that letter. So we're going to create a string called letter. And what are we going to set that equal to? That's going to be our clicked button dot text, whatever the text of that button is. We're going to store that inside the letter. Then once they click on it, we need to set it invisible so they cannot see it anymore. That way, they're not clicking the same letter multiple times. I don't know who would do that, but we have to code for that so they can't make that mistake. Now what we need to do is we need to traverse through every single letter of the word and see if the letter they selected matches one of the letters of the word. So we're going to do for int I equals 0, not O, but 0. As long as I is less than the length of the word, not the world, but the word, then we're good to go. And then, of course, we need to increment I. So we're starting at the first letter, which is actually index 0, the second letter, which is index 1, all the way to the end. Now, we need to see if the letter, now remember, the letter is whatever they clicked on. We need to see if that is equal to word.substring I, 1. We want to start at position I. We want to get one character. If it matches, then what we need to do is we need to change that specific label. And this is why we added all those labels to a list of labels earlier on. So all we need to do here, if it matches, we need to do letters, which is the name of my list, index I. What do I want to set the text property to? I want to set it equal to the letter. That's what I want to set it equal to. And if they got that right, I'm going to increment correct plus equals 1. Because remember, we got to keep track of how many letters they got correct, so we know when the game is over. And their success, their guess, they were successful. It equals true. Now, what you don't want to do here is an else statement. If you do an else statement, it's going to set success equal to false. So if we do else, wrong plus equals 1, success equals false, that means if they don't guess the last letter, it's always going to be set to false. So we actually need a separate if statement for that, and it needs to go outside of our for loop, because when we enter our for loop, success is false. The only way it's ever going to change to true is if the letter equals whatever letter we're on inside the word. Now, when we click on another letter, success will be created again, but it will be holding false. So that's why we did that there. So we never have to reset it. It'll reset it every time they click on a new button. So if they weren't successful, and there's a couple ways you can write this. You can write if success equals false. You can do if success not equal to true, or you can simply do not success, which means if success isn't true. So just showing you a couple different ways to write it. Well, if they weren't successful, that means they got a letter wrong. Then what we need to do is we need to update our image. So we'll do that in a method. So that way we don't have to this long unnecessary if statement. Now, if they got it wrong, we need to see if it's the 7th time they got it wrong. So if wrong is equal to 7, then you know what? It's game over for them. They died. So we're going to create that here. All we're going to do is we're going to do a message box. We want to show that message box. We want to say you lose. We want to tell them what the word was. The word was, and then we want to do that word. We definitely want to show them what the word was. It'll also allow us to make sure our game works as appropriately. We want to give that message box a title. We want to say game lost. Let's put an exclamation mark. Let them know, hey, you lost. And then we're simply going to do message buttons dot okay. And then just to be a little, to get the point across for that icon, we're going to do, let's do a stop sign. Let's do a stop sign, let them know, hey, stop playing the game, you lost. Now what we're going to do is we're going to reset the game anyway if they lose. Maybe ask them if they want to play again, but we need to test our code in a minute and make sure it is working. The next thing we need to do is we need to make sure that our if statement is working. So I want to put that inside the method, or not that our if statement's working, but if they won the game. So if correct equals word.length, then we know, hey, they won the game. So we're going to do message box.show you won. All right, we've created the labels, we've created our buttons. We'll need to update the image, but let's test our code and make sure it works. Looks like we have some errors here. Click, letter button, click. Oh, yep, plus equals. Because we're creating multiple buttons here, so it's got to be plus equals. We're adding this current button, we're assigning it. We got to do plus equals. There we go. There we go. That will fix our error. Oh, we need to call these methods. If we don't call these methods, they're never, ever going to run. So we need to create our keyboard. So we had that. We need to create our labels. Actually, we need to do that after we pick a word. So we need to pick our word. Then what we need to do is create our labels. We can't create the labels if we don't have a word picked, because we're not going to know what it is. And in our create labels, we did it based on the length of the word. All right, let's go ahead and run this. Take a look at what it looks like. And then if there's anything wrong, we'll analyze our code and fix it. If it comes out perfectly, that would be nice. All right, so the word is C#. Perfect. Okay, so our buttons did not come out correctly. That's okay, we'll fix it. We'll find out what's going on. They're all on top of one another, so I think it has to do with that top position. And now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know if I ever incremented the top position of the buttons. I'm almost positive we did not. Okay, so C sharp. C sharp, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It does have a length of 6 because we have C, S, H, A, R, P. So the P is showing up, the R is showing up, those buttons are disappearing. Let's find that C. Actually, it looks like the third row isn't even showing up. You lose, it was C sharp. It's actually right on top. Yeah, okay, because we added them centered. So C is on here. Looking for that H. There you go, you won. Now, obviously, we need to exit that when they win, and we haven't done that yet, or when they lose or win, we haven't done that yet, and we will momentarily. The first thing we need to do is fix the top position, because when we create those buttons, we need to make sure that they actually increase the top position. Now, I don't think I did that, so let's scroll down. We're going to look for this. And this is why you want to create methods. If I had all this in one line of code, it would be almost impossible to do. So they all look good, but the top position, I have that as 250. And that, because they're all 250, it never changes. So I need to do this right here outside that for loop. I need to go ahead and create the next top row, or reset the top row value, so it can actually move on to the next row appropriately. So let me find my notes here, because I know I did it, because I want it to look nice. And I've already figured out all the positions. So the top position is going to be for row 2. We're going to add on to what it already is, 250 plus the button height, and then the spacing. That is what I decided to do. And then I need to do the same thing for row 3, and that should move it down. So when your code doesn't work, the way you want it to, that's okay. Gives you a chance to analyze your code, figure out what's going on. And then because they're all on, so we get C sharp again. There we go. And it looks just like a keyboard. So now I can do C sharp, and we get that message saying you won. We also know you lost works as well. The next thing we need to do is we need to update those images. So we're going to go down here right after our clicked button, and we're going to create our update image button, or our update image method, which is simply going to be if statements that load a specific image. So 2 methods left to go. We have public, I'm going to spell public correctly, public void update image, because I want to update the image based on if they have 1 wrong, if they have 2 wrong. So it's just going to be some if statements. If wrong equals 1. Now, if they got the first guess wrong, I want to change the picture of pick status. So I do .image, and remember, it's properties dot resources. Now the next one that I have, and this is why I had it in sequential order, H2. So this is going to be if statements all the way down. So we just finished it. So now based on when they're wrong, it will update it. So they have, if wrong is 1, we load the second image. If they've been wrong twice, we load the third image. Once they're wrong the 7th and final time, we load the image that is dead. This is why it's so important you have names that make sense. It also makes typing it in a lot easier. Make sure they're else if statements. Could you make them all different if statements? Absolutely. But remember, you want your code to run efficiently. Remember, with if and else if, it's going to keep looking for the first one that is true. Once it finds the first one that is true, it does not look for any other ones. What we need now is we want to ask them, do you want to play again? So public void play again, because we're going to call this method a couple times, and we're going to do something a little differently in a minute. Dialog results, response. Now, you don't have to do response. For me, it makes it easy to read. So I'm going to do message box dot show. I'm going to say, do you want to play again? And maybe they do, maybe they don't. And I'm going to say, hey, the title for this, play again. And then we're going to give them the yes, no option. So message bot but message box buttons dot yes or no. We're going to give them that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to give them the icon, the question mark, just to give them that. And then I want to put that semicolon at the end. Now what we usually do here is we check to see if they selected yes. And you'll see C#. That's what people usually do. What I want to show you is there's multiple ways to do something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do if response equals dialog result dot no. If they select no, do application dot exit. If they select anything else, which is going to be yes, then application dot restart. And that's one of the benefits of the .NET framework is you can use application dot exit and application dot restart. The last thing we need to do is test our code. Make sure those buttons actually moved down. We already tested that, but make sure they're still moving down and making sure that we can win and that we can lose. Let's go ahead and let's test our program. Make sure you go back into your click event, otherwise your code's not going to work. We didn't call the play again method and we didn't call the update image method, so we need to do that. So you're going to go back into your button click event or your letter button click event where they were wrong, where we had call update image. We're going to put update image there, and then we're going to write you lose, the word was, we're going to call play again, and if they won, we're going to call play again. So now that we're ready, we can run. I wonder if it's going to choose C#. Nope, chose computer. That's fine. So let's test for wrong. Make sure these images are changing. And you can see they are indeed changing. They have one more try, and then they're dead. They died. And then you lose. The word was computer. Do you want to play again? If we hit no, it exits. Great. So let's run this again. So now the word is coding. So we'll get it right on the first try. And notice it's creating just the right amount of labels that we need, and they're close to centered. There was a lot of math trying to figure that out. It's not like I magically knew what those numbers were. When I was doing the rough draft of it, I had to work out those math numbers. I didn't magically know where they are. Unfortunately, there is no magic formula. You're just going to have to, do some trial and error to get it. We won. Now it should ask us, do we want to play again? If we hit yes, it should reset. It does. The word is Hangman. And we can see that it has just the right amount of labels that it needs. When I click that M, it will say that we won the game. If I choose a different one, it will start adding those images, and it will either win or lose. Because we know the word, we'll probably win. Hope you guys found this video helpful. If you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to help the channel grow. And we'll see you guys in the next programming video.